Hello, and welcome to the Smart Injury Doctors Podcast, the injury market's top program for doctors, lawyers, and insurers who want to gain greater insight on how to improve patient recovery results and deliver better services in the U.S. injury market. Please welcome your host, Dr. Jeffrey Allen Kronk.
Okay, doctors, today what I wanted to talk about is how does excessive motion testing pay for itself, especially when you're using an unbiased independent third party such as Spinal Kinetics. You know, at Spinal Kinetics, one of the things that comes up is, well, gosh, if I do a $540 test, how does it pay for itself? And, you know, the first thing that I want to say is if you do a $2,800 MRI, how does it pay for itself? If you do a 3,200 SPEC scan with a bone scan over the top of it to locate areas of sensitivity of the nerve, how does it pay for itself? If you do a CAT scan, how does it pay for itself? They're all the same. They all pay for themselves because basically you're documenting the main injury. Now, it just so happens that the excessive motion tests, such as a test by Spinal Kinetics, is probably one of the cheapest tests in the market today. And so it definitely pays for itself. But providers, really what providers are asking, I believe, when they're asking that, and it's a very myopic conversation. In other words, it's very short-sighted, is, okay, if I have $540 and basically I have MedPay or I have PIP coverage, I don't want to take that $540 or $1,080 out of my pocket in order to, you know, give it to somebody else. Same with the MRI. You're doing the same thing with the MRI. So providers, first of all, you know, as far as how does it pay for itself, it pays for itself because it picks up main injuries. So when you have a Spinal Kinetics test, one, you're able to immediately grade the sprain. You're immediately able to tell if you have a basic surgical level of ligament damage, which about 30% of your cases are going to have. Two, it gives you the option of being able to place in the impairment findings 2 areas of impairment. When I mean 2 areas of impairment, one, if you have a rateable level called alteration motion segment integrity, or if you have a lower level, it can qualify for a lower level of impairment rating. It also can tell you whether you need to do things like activity restriction in athletic return to play parameters and things like that. It can tell you on a more probable than not basis if you have disc herniations in the area just from the testing results itself. It can support and justify your care by proper placement into your care treatment guidelines. It can help you grade the severity of the sprain so it's not just looked upon as you're just making referrals out for MRI. It can basically really assist you with making sure that your treatment program itself is established. It can help in basically helping you to target and get better treatment results. It can help you to really hone in on where the facet injury is. It basically gives you the understanding of the mild traumatic brain injury profile for the cervical profile, which is one of the most important profiles in that injury state. So it does all of those things, and it does all of those things for the provider, and it's a $540 test. So when somebody says, well, does it pay for itself? Oh my God, it pays for itself. It pays for itself over and over and over again. So the other thing that is kind of rampant in the industry, especially in my chiropractic industry, I was a trained chiropractor, licensed chiropractor for years and years, still am. And my profession has a tendency to undervalue itself. So a lot of times the providers are saying, well, does it pay for itself? Are those providers that are charging $300 or $400 or $500 a treatment session, and they want to be fully paid? Right? They're using things like, new modalities, or they're using lasers. They're using a lot of different things. And the cost per treatment is starting to get into the, $200 to $500 per treatment area. And they're wondering, how can they make sense of a $540 test, which makes 0 sense. So, of course, it's easy to look at this aspect of it, a lot of providers today get upset because they don't get paid. They don't get paid in full. The attorney's cutting their bill in half. The insurer's denying their care. See, when you have under documentation, you have overutilization. So really take this in for just a second. When you have under documentation, you have overutilization. Now, you may not have overutilization, you may have under documentation, but since your under documentation is there, the perception is of overutilization. And overutilization can lead to, unwanted circumstances that you really don't want in your private practice. So, in my experience, you want this, the excessive motion test is one of the most important tests in the country today. It really is in the spinal market today. So again, if I look, what does an x-ray do? Well, it basically says, hey, do I have a fracture? Do I have a disease? Do I have an infection? It can start to pick that up. My ligament damage is picked up. My severity and location is picked up. How much instability I have is picked up. I can grade the severity of the sprain. I can determine if I have a surgical level. I can place in the impairment guides in 2 different places for ligament damage. I know if I've got activity restrictions because there's guidelines that suggest that I need to activity restrict. I can tell where the facet injury is itself. I have the mild traumatic cervical injury profile established. I can establish better and more accurate MRI referrals, and I can support all of my care. What am I doing with a CAT scan? I'm looking to see if I got a fracture. What am I doing with an MRI? I'm looking to see if I got a disc. But if I've got a disc, that disc is a pre-existing condition. Without the other tissue around the disc, it's basically, how did the disc injury happen without hitting the other tissue? There's no smart bomb of energy that just hits that disc. So, when providers say, it's very short-sighted to say, hey, how does it pay for itself? But let's again go back to this. Let's say that you have $10 million in accounts receivable and you're used to taking 50% reductions. Okay, so basically you bill 10 million and you basically take 5 million, and that's what you're willing to take. Okay, so you have 5 million that can be recovered. Now, let's say that half of that is recovered, or 2.5 million is recovered. What would recover it? Well, you'd recover it with better documentation. And if CRMA provided that better documentation, would it pay for itself? Of course it would. Of course it does. All imaging pays for itself because it drives the care. It drives all care. So I just wanted to address that on a short little, riff on a podcast, so that for those of you that are out there that are thinking or you've ever had that thought, hopefully this addresses that thought, because what I do on these podcasts is we just take common things that come into either the Smart Injury Doctors program or the Spinal Kinetics, and not that the two are linked. They're not linked. I own both companies, but they're not linked. You don't have to be a Smart Injury Doctors to use Spinal Kinetics, and Spinal Kinetics doctors don't have to be Smart Injury Doctors. They're completely separate programs. The Smart Injury Doctors program is a program designed to assist providers with carving out a niche within the personal injury market. That's probably the easiest niche to carve out. So it's the easiest place I know of to grow your injury practice. Spinal Kinetics is a testing company. It's a diagnostic testing company. The two are completely different. Doctors, if you have any questions, or you have any, you want to know more about Spinal Kinetics, just go out to thespinalkinetics.com and check out their website. Check it out. If you want to know more about the Smart Injury Doctors program, you just go to www.smartinjuryDoctors.com, and you can find more about the program itself. Doctors, as always, short, sweet, and to the point. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your attention. Look, I believe the best spinal injury doctors in the market should be the highest paid injury doctors. I know you're busy. I appreciate your attention, and I look forward to delivering more content on the next podcast.
You've been listening to the Smart Injury Doctors Podcast, the #1 audio production show for professionals in the U.S. injury market that want to deliver better injury services to the patients, clients, or insureds they serve. If you like what you heard today, please leave us a review, and don't forget to join us on our next program.